We now have the pleasure of hearing from Ms. Susan Hwee, IBF Distinguished Fellow and Head of Group Tech and Ops at UOB, as she shares insights from her illustrious career in the area of tech and how professionals can thrive outside their comfort zone and excel in their career. Conducting the Fireside Chat is our very own Senior Career Advisor, Mr. Adrian Wu. During the session, please feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A window, and Susan will address these live during the session. I'll now hand the time over to Adrian and Susan. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, Flo. Hi, Susan. Hi, everybody who's joining us. There she is. Hi, Susan. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Fantastic. Okay, so guys, thank you everybody for joining us here today. And again, before I go and speak accolades about Susan, I just want to say a few things for our friends who are joining us from overseas who don't know much about the IBF Careers Connect team, the team that I belong in. Basically, we're a team of career advisors slash business developers. So if you ever have issues with particular areas of career journey and so on and so forth, if you need a helping hand, come talk to us. Same for the companies that are joining us here today. If you are looking for talent pipelines to tap onto, please also approach us, and we'd be very happy to help you out with that as well. It is my great pleasure to speak to Susan. Susan, I've seen you in many other interviews and videos across the years. I recently saw you on an internal UOB one as well. So it's a really great pleasure for me to be here with you today. And in keeping in the same flavor of what we do or what I do, I think that the whole nature of this conversation is going to be a little bit more closer to the ground, if you understand what I mean. So the questions that we have for you are primarily about issues and things that maybe the common person might encounter. Hopefully, we can tap your expertise on that. Okay, so Susan, the first question that I have for you is the question that you are totally fluent in answering it, because most of the interviews that you've done, the first question is basically talk to us about your professional career, right? So when I sort of research your background, in my humble opinion, by all accounts, it seems that you've achieved all measures of professional success, right? And before we go into specific tech or industry questions, I very much would like to find out about the mindset, the skills, attributes that help you to get to where you are, right? Presumably, when you first started out, as a trainee in IBM, for example, as a female, for example, it must have been a challenge. So what helped you persevere? What helped you climb the ladder to where you are now, be it internal traits and maybe environmental factors that was very helpful to you?
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. And Adrian, thank you for the kind words. I think before I share, I must say, I think with a bit of luck, opportunity and circumstance of those days, these opportunities presented themselves, and then, I'm just given the opportunity and privilege to take on the many challenges and exciting opportunities along the way to be where I am today. So without that, I don't think it is at all possible. Right? When I first started in the industry, it was in the mid-80s, quite near then another crisis. It was the oil crisis, and there was recession. But I was quite clear that I wanted to join the banking industry, but to find a way to start. Like many, I think hopefully, some of our audience here who are interested in either doing a switch into technology or doing a switch into technology and banking at the same time, which was exactly where I think many of my contemporaries were at that point in time in the 80s. And in the mid-80s, I think Singapore was just starting up its computerization program across, and it's called computerization, right? So you can imagine. And you don't have the privilege and the opportunity of a lot of the formal schools, a school of computing, school of information science, a faculty related to that. We're just doing like a minor in programming, just to have an exposure in that, right? And So, in good faith, how do we all begin? And then I want to go into banking. And in banking, yes, you have the School of Business Administration, you have the accountancy. That's typically a start, but I was from the STEM faculties, right? So how do I even get in and all that? So I was looking for opportunities for retraining, opportunities for development, opportunities that give me a possibility of an inroad. I don't know exactly where I will be, but looking for that possibility, right? So I was very fortunate. IBF came along, retrained with whatever notion that you had on programming, but really on the concepts of big computers, process changes, designs. And in those days, the technology was not even as mature and as sophisticated as what we have today. You can say it's simpler, but it's also not simple in that sense, right? You have a mainframe computer, but that time, all of its memory was nothing but 4 meg, Today, you have it in a little, drive, right? And so the way you do your programming, the way you then work with those, you have to think technically, a lot more grounding technically. And then also on top of that, the business domain of banking. Yeah, and all the different aspects of it. So I was quite fortunate. So I was, fortunate to be part of IBM's story and to be trained by them. And then I joined Citi. And Citi was one of my clients when I was with IBM. And that's how I started my career. And it's opportunities of change along the way, but with a vague idea of where I would like to be. So I was, on hindsight, very fortunate to have chosen, technology, which is, engineering or really structured analysis, the way we've been trained to look at it. And then, of course, banking and is never a down moment. And it flourishes alongside, I think, the growth of Singapore's story, right?
And Susan, I just want to pick up on what you just said because I find it very interesting. Because when we work with like job seekers, for example, right, the way you've pitched your career is amazing. But we also know that these career decisions, they don't happen linearly. Like, for example, if I want something, it's going to happen. So for yourself, opportunities abound, and you've been with UOB for like 21 years, for example, right? How do I say this? What kind of like attitudes or skills do you think that you brought to the table that your bosses says, you know what, I want Susan on this job, for example, because I think these kinds of lessons or these kinds of insights would be very helpful for the people who join us here in terms of, a lot of them say, I actually know what I want, but I just don't know why I just can't crack that wall, for example. So for example, how do you, do you have any like recollections or reflections on how you managed to, buy someone's support or or earn someone's support? What kind of things did you do to slowly be successful? Yeah.
I think of course, being the first job as a trainee, don't know anything, just fortunate probably. I think grades is not enough, right? Because if you just talk grades, I came from STEM, yes, IBM, but there were other and better, students around. But I don't know, maybe it's just the ability to convince, but also to share a story of what I've done outside of school, right?
Okay.
I mean, to show that sense of hunger and the attitude of adaptability. But that's very early days as a student, so probably doesn't quite apply today with many of our audience. But I do remember when actually I was at the point in time, I was quite clear. I was very curious, yes, I understand technology, but I still don't understand, how banking actually makes money. And while I can understand, how I write the program to optimize the memory or whatever it is of the computing systems, but I don't understand how the product in banking actually works. So I was very, very curious. That's one, right? The second one was that, and I knew that, somehow it's like, I want to change and I don't know what it was. Not that there was a lot of push. IBM was a great company. But there was a curiosity and a hunger to say, there must be something more. There must be something more I can do, right? And I don't know what it is. I don't have the benefit of going to business schools, investment banking, or anything like that. A very typical, STEM student, right? And so I actually had 3 job offers at that point in time when I was deciding to look out. But I just think, what do you think? I was seeking advice, like every one of you, meeting somebody like you, for instance, and even my colleagues to say, I have this offers. How do you think about it? Which organization, number one, will give me that opportunity, their points of view, because I don't know banking other than as a customer of IBM. Yes, I understand the banking industry that way, right? And then the other one is, so by the time I narrowed down to the 2 banks, one of them was obviously Citibank. I won't mention the name of the other bank. The other one was, the other job I remembered was given for me to be sort of like a go-between, between the software development department and the business. That would also has given me some insight, but that would have narrowed me a little bit in terms of what I can do. And I felt I'm neither here nor there, right? Either I go to business or I go into hard sciences, but I don't want to just start in a job that's a go-between. I needed something a bit more foundational. And came along Citi, and Citi was a very interesting one. And that was really a plunge of faith a little bit. Was because I'm so curious about banking and how they make money. Because if I don't know, how can I help build systems, right? And so on. And I don't understand enough about banking to really even pin down exactly where I would end at this point in time. And I remember talking to several people, and the role that was given to me was a very interesting one. I was hired as a chief of staff to a business manager in charge of consumer banking for Southeast Asia, for a few countries in Southeast Asia. What is the chief of staff? Essentially doing what, like an executive assistant, business manager in today's terms, or sort of a quasi COO in those terms, helping him with his business letters, special projects that he may want to take on at that point in time. Sometimes helping him prepare for his meetings, looking at the P&L and so on and so forth. And the reason I know was very uncomfortable too, is like, is this a job, a real job? But what I really liked about it was it gave me an opportunity to learn the different aspects of banking. Really to go in and see from the eyes of a senior business executive what he looks at. And therefore you can see the big picture, and then look at how the various learning is. And of course, Citibank was a great organization that also then gave me all the technical training in banking, like banking, operations in banking and all that. And they were also then having big ambition on building up their computerization, automating things, and so on and so forth. So that was my first job, right? Then came the second one, where there was an opportunity, and again, a few roles. And the role given to me at that point in time was to look at the project to help streamline the consumer banking, and essentially to re-engineer the whole consumer banking business, from the front office to the mid office to the credit process to the back office and all that, and rationalize it. That rationalization together, of course, consultants came in to help, but is to drive it for Singapore and Malaysia, and that resulted in significant savings, and the revenue post that oil crisis then picked up significantly, like a 48% jump in revenue. And for that, you were given recognition because it was difficult. You have very difficult conversations. One of it is cost reduction. The major part of it is labor. And you know, as a young professional, is how to handle all these difficult conversations, right? And the eagerness, you make mistakes along the way, but you're young enough to make those mistakes, yeah? But supportive managers and leaders learning through that change. And then post that, then I was given the next role, which is to helm technology and operations after this change to bring it forward, yeah? new programs, new capabilities, also to shape the banking operations, setting the controls and everything else and so on. So very early days, but very early given those responsibilities. And I must say I made a lot of mistakes along the way, right? But through that mistakes, not how you fall, but how you pick yourself up and move forward with the team, so that both the management that has, given me that privilege and responsibility, as well as I think the faith the team has given me to follow my direction. We can't fail, right? I can't fail both, and you just have to charge forward. Yeah.
I think that's great. And I was listening to you, Susan, and I personally believe that all the things that you had mentioned are still very relevant now from a career perspective, like what you mentioned: curiosity, hunger, overcoming challenges. You know what, if you don't know anything, get in there and make sense of everything. Yes, the starting point, and start growing your branches. I think that's super, relevant even now. And indeed, it's what we share with our, job seekers who come and talk to us as well, in terms of what kind of attributes that they should be displaying more. So thank you so much for that. I just hanging on to that whole diversity angle as well. I remember reading a Straits Times article last year about women who have STEM degrees and who are working in related jobs, and how rare it still is. I mean, from your perspective, do you see things changing? And how do you see the industry as a whole can sort of encourage more women to follow, your path, perhaps, or go into technology, for example? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think, technology is a very broad area, right? You have from the real hardcore sciences of chip engineering to computing, computer electronic engineering, to the real core of operating systems, and then to software development, and of course then to creating new world order, like in social media and everything else, including digital marketing and so on. So I think technology today has many spectrum of it. But in order to do well in any one of these, obviously, to me, it's not so much that you need to be STEM, but you need to be fairly, you need to have an aptitude to be fairly structured, and whether you can notice patterns, right? So if you think when we go to school, be it whether it's an art school or an engineering school and all that, the practice of analysis, right? Analysis of events, learning from history, what has happened, or looking at patterning of making sense when you're doing research, and so on, to say, can you then draw some conclusion in order to predict the future, and how can you make better for it, right? So that way you can, it is about learning, is about able to capture the essence, and not just the essence, but the principles of those essence, because you have to apply this learning to forward problems, not yesterday's problems, right? Because yesterday's problems has been solved already, correct? So we don't know what the future will bring, but to have enough confidence that you have extracted the essence and the principles of those learning, and how do you still apply and find the right application for it. So I think that kind of training is important, and that aptitude is important. So some of us like doing it like that, and some of us prefer a different kind of skill, right? Inner skill in there. So I'm speaking to those who has those aptitude first, right? And not to be boxed, it must be STEM. Having STEM, of course, the STEM discipline in all the traditional STEM, this is a hardcore training that you do every day, which you honed, in your studies and everything else, and so on and so forth, right? Again, it's about learning principles and applying and looking for future problems that we are trying to solve, or creating new capabilities, new solutions, new discovery, new inventions, right? So I would say I want to put it in that context first, so that our audience, depending on the background, and don't have to come in and say it must be STEM, otherwise I can't convert to technology, or I can't convert to banking. It's not the case, right? It's really an aptitude for problem solving. Then you asked the question on, what does it take to encourage more women to go into STEM, right? Related stuff. I would say there was a period in Singapore's history where technology went through the troughs where it was fashionable to outsource, coding is seen to be mundane work, and so on. We went through that period. And during that period also, then there was a blossoming of other opportunities, right? Marketing, investment banking, and all that took the talents out. And as women, we have maybe a bit more opportunity. Some of us prefer to be homemakers and pursue other interests as well. We're quite fortunate that way. So I think is a matter of looking now and looking going forward. Where do we see the demand for roles and work? Yeah, and I think in the immediate future, technology and acceleration of changes in our society, our businesses, our business models, and all that will be enabled through technology and by technology, right? And so I think the opportunity is now to make that switch. And for those who are thinking of going into school, that kind of STEM grounding is a grounding for every other discipline, not just necessarily technology and banking, right? So I would say that foundational, look at it as foundational training more than anything else, and then decide specialization at a later point. Yeah.
Susan, I want to also ask you again. So sorry, cheeky, this is my job, right? So I want to ask you, right? You mentioned that it's not necessarily you have to have a STEM degree, but other disciplines as well can also participate in this burgeoning growth of technology and technology jobs, right? But from a practical perspective, right? Let's say when you are a hiring manager and maybe you do get to review resumes and applications right now, what does it take for a person who doesn't have a hardcore STEM type of background to impress you, or in terms of what does he or she might have to show in their application to demonstrate that, hey, I want to join this bandwagon and I would like to, take notice of me. So what's the best advice you can give for people who are looking to make these sorts of changes, and how do they demonstrate this to your recruiters and so on and so forth? What do you think would
So that's quite a general question. So it depends on the level, right? The more senior you are, and expectations of seniority that comes with pay and grade and everything else. If you want says, I've been less, for argument's sake, I've been a managing director, or I'm a very senior person in, let's say, a hotel industry. Okay. And I used to run the entire hotel, and therefore when I come into banking, I want to run the entire business of banking, or one of the lines of banking. Then I would say, you need to check that realism, right? Particularly at the more senior you are, because then the expectation of contribution, knowledge is equally important, not just past experiences of success. So is then you need to demonstrate what else that could you have done in another industry that could sort of predict that you could helm that area of expertise that has a certain area of risk and understanding that's required, so that that bridge can be built to say, yeah, there's a probability that the person can do it. Okay, so if we're talking middle and a bit more junior, the middle management, right? We tend to use the term PMET, is that what we call it? The mid-career switches and everything else. I think that's the big sweet spot, right? Enough experience, which means you understand what it takes to work in corporates, working with teams and all that. And hopefully has enough humility to also understand, this is what I know, this is what I don't know, right? And how then, to me, humility is a good thing for me, right? Because if you are humble about what you don't know, means you at least know what you have to do, right? And versus then what you know, we will be looking and asking questions, how did you apply that knowledge into different scenarios? Yeah, and you need to be able to demonstrate, because that adaptability is what we are looking for. Banking can be taught, right? Technical skills, if you have the aptitude and you put the tenacity and your time in it, you can learn. Yeah, but that softer notion of how do you apply? Yeah, do you have that curiosity? Do you think? Do you engage and challenge yourself? How do you apply it? How do you make it better? In those, that's how you can bring, I think, your interviewer and all that impression across.
Thanks, Susan. That's great. Just shifting the focus a little bit to recognize the Singaporeans who are presently overseas and who are joining us here from all across the world. You manage thousands of staff across the region. You centralize all of UOB's banking system across all the countries you operate, right? So for professionals who are maybe overseas Singaporeans or citizens looking to come back and wanting to join, say, a bank like UOB, what kind of value would you recognize or place on people with overseas experience, and the areas that these people can contribute to the bank, for example?
Yeah. Maybe I'll give a bit of background about UOB first, so that in the audience, if you are citizens or Singaporeans or hopefully talents too, who's interested to come to Singapore or interested to explore. UOB is about 80 years old, right? And we've grown from a Singapore bank to today operating in 19 countries, and we have 5 subsidiaries, which means there are local banks in the various Southeast Asian countries that we operate in, right? From Vietnam to Thailand to Malaysia, Indonesia, and also a subsidiary now in China, right? So we have a very large footprint. We have centralized and standardized our entire banking platform since 2014, right? Significant investments has been made. And even just, I think, a year before COVID, we launched our digital bank in Thailand. We didn't choose to launch in Singapore. We launched it in Thailand, a very competitive and very creative market, but it was designed and built out of here, all right? And all done in 14 months. A full bank, not just a minimum viable product, with chatbots, cards, payments, current accounts, savings accounts, and the whole chatbot service, digital onboarding, and full works, 14 months, fully agile methodologies in there. And then during COVID, we couldn't do any marketing, we couldn't do any funfair. We launched it in Indonesia, all right, end of 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And the feedback from these 2 markets has been tremendous, right? Very, very good testament to the platform we've created, the engineering teams that we've got together, and the business platform and the vision of building a truly pan-Southeast Asian bank, that's strong regional bank in Asia. And with that success, we came back, and this year we launched in UOB Singapore tomorrow, right? And we move our previous award-winning app, Mighty, take all the lessons, and we begin to brand that tomorrow brand as our digital offering in there. So all these are, opportunities of the platform that we've created, but it also means that we created a platform that can build tremendous careers for like-minded individuals who's looking for challenges, because you need to work with different cultures. Our team here is a very diverse team, right? We have obviously Singaporeans. We have nationalities from India, a traditional technology, very strong technology resource, right? But we also have from our European countries, we have English, we have Swiss, we have Spanish, we have German, we have Australians, besides, of course, Philippines, mainland China, and so on, right? And then we have to work for our businesses with the very different regulations, culture, rules, and regulation in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in China. And all this from here and working through. So we need people who wants to work in a diverse background and wants to who enjoys that interaction, but also the challenges that comes with it, right? Singapore is a small country, but we can be larger than life when we build a regional brand like this. And we've created a platform for careers, for individuals who's looking for that challenge, right? So I think for our participants overseas who are in this discussion, I would strongly encourage you to explore opportunities with us. And many of the other banks in Singapore too, because our ambition is to grow outside of Singapore. But within UOB, we've created a technology platform, I would say very few like us, that has created it as a global platform to build our banking businesses in all the countries we operate.
That's great, Susan. And also, I guess the next couple of questions that I thought about, kind of similar theme, but I'm going to go one by one. So for yourself, if we go a bit broader in terms of your exposure, you kind of, I believe you co-chair the industry steering committee that sort of like laid the foundation for many of Singapore's real-time payment services such as PayNow, right? Are you able to kind of reflect or comment on the digitalization efforts in the the financial sector, and your, I don't know, you call it crystal ball or what, but exciting industry developments that you see over the last few years, leading to maybe interesting new or exciting career opportunities for professionals who might be keen to participate in this, in this new wave, for example, or new space of hiring.
Yeah, I mean, together with the Singapore Clearinghouse and our Association of Banks and all my counterparts from the other banks, I was privileged, right, to be given the opportunity to steer the implementation of FAST. Right?
Yes.
Actually, PayNow sits on FAST. Without FAST, PayNow doesn't work. PayNow is only what we call a lookup registry, right? So that we make your account number not so transparent, and easier for everyone to transact. So that FAST took about 4 years, I think, to implement, with the effort from everybody and so on. And then after that, innovation. That's what I mean, building a right foundation, and then innovation can scale, right? So you have PayNow, you have then the QR, and so on. And in the few years ago, we also launched what we call SG Findex, which is Singapore's version of open banking. And also at UOB, we are the ones together with, again, ABS, our other banks, and MAS, we led the authoring of what we call the open banking standards, the API standards that we're recommending that within Singapore we could all adopt. That's in there. So there are many opportunities to create, I would say, enablers to create and accelerate future changes. And if you look, I won't say the crystal ball is anybody's guess. If I can see the crystal ball so clear, we all will be, billionaires or avoided, some of the current volatility on cryptocurrency or whatever. But I would say that technology, the ability to, I think, use technology to enable creative, innovative, and disruptive business models are here to stay for a while, right? And we have not seen the end of that technology revolution as we see it today. It will only accelerate, right? So you have things like the blockchain technology, right? I mean, cryptocurrency is only an application of that, but I think that one that technology has links. Yeah, data, we are only just beginning to understand a lot of the data that we have. We're one of the richest, UOB has one of the richest data stores, very structured, that we have created it. And a lot of the things that we're using, if you go into tomorrow, we have used the term hyper-personalization and everything else. AI, machine learning is created through that, right? And so if you're interested in data, there's lots of things we can do. And to me, even though we have been working on it for a few years, I will say we're just at the cusp of this acceleration. Despite challenges in how do we then deal with data privacy, sovereignty, protection, and so on, which we all as technologists, and also for us in banking, for which we hold banking secrecy utmost, because that trust is important. What can we do in order to do a much better job at it, right? So if you take a look at data, you take a look at distributed ledgers and the application around it, which includes AI, machine learning, and further automation already to today, what can be seen as very efficient banking processes, there's still a lot more we can do to take out the cost associated with it, right? So I would say even more demand for technology solutions.
And Susan, I will also on that note, I'm looking at some of the questions and answers. So what I'm going to do in the time left is it just so happens that the questions are tied into the questions I have. So we're gonna answer them all together at one go. So the next one I wanted to find out, which then will answer the first question that I'm looking at now, is something that I see or my team sees, and that's the whole idea of upskilling and reskilling. So, when technology exploded, especially exacerbated when COVID hit and everything just sped up, right? It's like nonstop train, right? Cybersec, like UI, UX, and so on and so forth, right? Continues to grow. And I guess in response, right, a lot of people in the workforce responded to the call by upskilling or reskilling themselves to take advantage of these new opportunities, right? But I speak from, or when I think about a career pivoter, like early on, we talked about someone with no experience. From a perspective, I'd say a career pivoter who has had X number of years experience doing something totally different. And he or she has answered the call, take a three-month course, 6-month course, 9 months course, so that they can have something on paper to demonstrate to whoever that might listen or view that I this is my intention to make a move, right? Would it be an unfair question to ask you, for example, what do you think are some of the areas in tech, for example, that have lower barriers to entry, for example, presumably like what you mentioned, if you have no background and you want to make that leap straight to data science because you think it's sexy, you have to check yourself, for example, right? But maybe what kind of advice do you think you can give? Or maybe, as I said, like, if those lower barrier to entries kind of like roles within that space, that someone who's just come out newly minted from a short course can maybe look at and consider?
Maybe I can share with the participants what we did together, with IBF, and we did a program where we were trying to train cyber security specialists, right?
Yep.
And we took in, I think, a few batches, and we put them through a 2-year after they've done the course. But then we come back into the bank, a 2-year also rotation to the different stations. And then from there, as you go through the stations, I think individuals who has not done, let's say, cybersecurity or tech and all that, you begin to understand the aptitude that's required to do the job, not just the attitude, but the aptitude, and therefore where the gaps are. And with that realization, which one would be a better starting point, right? So there are programs like that the banks and together with IBF, we do. I can give a few examples. One is security, the other one is cloud engineering. Data is definitely one of those, and so on and so forth, right? So for those, please work with IBF, because IBF works very closely with all the banks to see how we can have programs to facilitate the meeting of minds. Because sometimes when I say the meeting of minds is, as participants, you also have, or you're trying to make a switch, you do have expectations, whether those expectations are realistic or not. And then, of course, sometimes as employers, because we don't, in my position, for instance, or our HR director, we don't see everybody. We have to delegate it to some of our team members and so on and so forth. But through ABF, we are able to make sure that some of the biasness in hiring and the open-mindedness to bring talents into the industry and to groom and to retrain. And we need to give a platform for that to happen. We will try to make it happen to do so, right? So I just want to put that in the background so that for all our attendees today, you have one. That's why Adrian is here, right? In here, there are many programs in there. Now, a bit more specific, for those of you who are interested in coming through, let's say, for example, to join UOB, right? And technology, there's many, many jobs. I can share with you all the different roles. One that is a bit less technical, but beginning to be technical, will be customer experience, customer journeys.
Yep.
Right, we are all customers. Of course, if you run a business and you have been in the treasury of a manufacturing or whatever it is, actually you can go into customer experience too, because we have corporate banking systems meant for treasurers for such companies, right? For those of you who may not be as inclined in the corporate side, you and I are also consumers. So you know when you go through it, hey, this doesn't work lah, you know, and how do we design it and everything else, right? So for one, is related to tech because that's what we're building, but that is a very important element of design. So one aspect of it, right? Then you have moving from that customer experience and journey, you have then UI UX designers who then takes that and becomes a little bit more technical because you need to create frameworks and so on and so forth, right? And for those who then likes it even more, then you can do, you know, and go into a Teams and you can then go in and if you're interested, then it's the actual programming of coding for the phone. But even the phone, there's a set of technologies, but you're not actually programming or coding right to the back end, right? And there's some of you who says, hey, I know accounting. Well, I've been an accountant, but I don't know banking. Can I join? Not? But I also don't know customer journey and all these things. I've gone to an aptitude. I want to be a data science, right? Person, or I want to join technology, but I just don't know how to start. Yeah, for example, I will say, let me share with you where I think your strengths are. Your strengths, you understand accounting, and actually banking is all about accounting, right? Because we take care of people's money, yeah, and we have to represent it in different forms to the customer, to our banking books, P&L, to our regulators, and so on and so forth. And we're financial reporting all the time, right? So you can start there to say, can I join a department that can use my skill, while at the same time I can learn banking, and it gives me an opportunity maybe to work on projects related to it, so I can learn the technical side of things. And there are plenty of such jobs, okay? Be it in my team, because we are always looking for functional analysts, business analysts that can help us bridge some of the discussions with our finance teams and so on, and how do we design the chart of accounts and so on. So you will definitely understand the chart of accounts. You may not understand, you know, how we do the coding and all that, but you can come in and learn, but you are contributing at the same time, all right? Or you can go into the each of the business departments and says, I understand accounting, I know how to do P&L and everything else. Yes, I don't understand your banking side, but I've picked up a skill. Let's say, for instance, I know how to do this tool, visualization on some of the more MIS, the data analyst tools. I'm not saying data science, data analyst tools. And that's the very good way to start, okay? Because you're able to take data, make sense of the data, you're practicing using the tooling and all that. And then you can make a switch and decide, do you really want to go in the hard science of being a data scientist, right? Now knowing the domain, or no, actually that's really not what I want. I really enjoy this part of financial analysis, right? And that financial analysis today requires those skills. They are not exactly technology skills, but these are technical skills that's expected. It's like in my days, you know, not everybody can know how to use Word and Microsoft Excel, but now today is a given. Yeah. I hope that gives you some examples. What I urge you all to do is look at yourself, what skills you have, what strengths you could apply, and then work with Adrian and all that, who's working with all the banks to look for possibilities of matches for you to start. Yeah.
Yeah, and Susan, I just want to say, you have just provided the most precise answer that I've ever experienced when I ask people this question, right? So I don't know whether my colleagues in comms is online right now, but what Susan was mentioning is what we call the Technology Finance Immersion Program, TFIP, and it just so happens we just launched 2022 fresh. Okay, so I wonder if any of my colleagues who are on the session can maybe put a link to the TFIP application in the chat box right now for everybody to look at. And also, Susan, thanks for supplementing it with the other pathways as well. And on that note, I have a question from someone who's asking, any advice for future TFIP applicants who are interested in UOB? Well, this is like the inner kind of like secrets that they're trying to fish out. So I don't know whether it's something that you want to comment on, or whether you can
I saw two questions, and thank you very much for some of it. I answered the first one very quickly first.
Oh, the upskilling one?
Yeah, the upscale and reskilling.
Okay.
What programs do we have inside UOB, right? We have a program, our HR director has created a program called A Better You. That means a better future you. Hopefully, for my colleagues within UOB, and it's meant for the general bank, not for technologists. Technologies, I think the career path is a slightly different discussion because you're already in technology, right? But for the general, so we have better storytelling, for example, in using data. How do you tell a story with data? We have also design workshops, and a few others. And for those of you who are already part of the UOB family, I would really urge you take a look at that program and look at how it applies and help yourself. Right? I have heard very, very good feedback from some who has attended. The second question is for those who are interested in joining UOB through the TFIP program, right? Strongly encourage you to try the TFIP program, right? And I must congratulate you for having the courage to want to do the switch. And the banking industry requires more talent everywhere. So looking forward to have the opportunity to meet some of you. I would say the best way is to go in and take a look at the program. And take a look first, not so much of just within UOB first, but to say which are the programs that meets your needs, right? Your preference, your need, your desire, coupled with the aptitude in each of those, which is the easiest starting position for you, right? Once you identify that starting position, you can then always go back to TFIP because the UOB works very closely with our partners, such as IBF, right? And we're always interested what programs they have, who do they have, and how do we do it. And from what I understand, for some of these programs, there's just not enough people who wants to take it up, right? So I would encourage you to do that, and they in turn will provide the linkages to us through our HR because we have vacancies, right? And the whole vacancies is all registered with our HR department, and then we can look for possibilities.
Fantastic, Susan. And just keeping track of time so that we can make way for the next people. We can carry on and on, and we'll probably not be able to answer all the questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I think it was an incredibly enlightening session. I mean, like a lot of the sessions are very high level and that's great, but I think that this session is very much closer to the ground. And I'm hoping that the advice, I'm not even hoping, I'm sure the advice that you've given will be very, very resonant to the people who are joining us today. So I really want to thank you for your time and wish you a really good rest of the day.